The sky was the first thing to change. It darkened at midday, not with clouds, but with something far worse. They arrived without warning, their massive warships sliding into Earth's orbit like silent executioners. Cities beneath them were cast in shadow, their towering forms blotting out the sun. Panic rippled across the world as every screen, every radio, every frequency broadcast a single chilling message. We are the Zenari. Your world now belongs to the Empire. Submit and be spared. Resist and be eradicated. The voice was cold, emotionless, and absolute. There was no offer of diplomacy, no declaration of war. It was not a demand. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the confidence of an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds before. They expected the same outcome here. But humans were not like the others. There was fear, yes. Governments scrambled, people fled, and sirens wailed across the globe. But amidst the chaos, a response was crafted, debated, and finally, defiantly delivered. A single message, transmitted back to the Zenari fleet. Come and take it. The response was met with silence. Then the first shots were fired. Blinding beams of energy rained down from the heavens, carving scars into the earth. Skyscrapers crumbled, entire districts vanished in an instant, and millions were lost before they even had a chance to understand what was happening. The Zenari made no distinctions between soldiers and civilians. Every human was an enemy to be crushed. The first wave of destruction was swift, ruthless, and absolute. They believed it would break humanity. They had seen it happen before, watched species fall into submission the moment they realized they were powerless. But Earth did not kneel. The first counterattack came within hours. It was feeble compared to the firepower of the Zenari, but it was enough to prove one thing: they were not invincible. Fighter jets, primitive by galactic standards, swarmed the skies, weaving between energy blasts and launching everything they had. Artillery batteries that should have been wiped out by orbital strikes found gaps in the Zenari's targeting systems and opened fire. Some pilots died before they even saw the enemy, but others lived long enough to see their missiles find a mark, to watch as massive warships shuddered under impacts they had never been designed to endure. The Zenari's foot soldiers landed soon after, towering creatures clad in gleaming armor, wielding weapons that cut through concrete like paper. They moved with brutal efficiency, carving through human defenses as if they were nothing. But then the war shifted. Humans refused to fight the way the Zenari expected. There were no neat battle lines, no organized retreat. Cities turned into death traps. Skyscrapers became sniper nests. Underground tunnels became ambush zones. Fighters moved in shadows, striking where they were least expected and disappearing before the enemy could retaliate. The Zenari had come to dominate, expecting their superior firepower to end the war in days. But Earth had never been about superiority. Earth was about endurance, about adaptation, about winning no matter the cost. And the invaders were about to learn that the hard way. The first wave of Zenari ground troops landed with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Their dropships descended in perfect formation, exhaling massive columns of smoke and dust as their landing thrusters scorched the earth. As soon as the ramps hit the ground, they poured out, massive warriors, 10 feet tall, clad in sleek black armor that pulsed with energy. Their weapons hummed with lethal potential, sending arcs of blue plasma into anything that moved. They had done this before. They expected the same outcome. They would not get it. At first, human soldiers tried to fight the way they had trained, head-on, in formation, using tactics that had worked in every war before this one. But the Zenari were too strong, too fast, too advanced. Entire squads were wiped out in seconds, their bullets bouncing harmlessly off alien armor. Tanks and armored vehicles rolled into position, only to be vaporized by weapons that turned steel into slag. The Zenari called it a slaughter. Humans called it the moment they realized they had to change the rules. Within hours, the battle shifted. The airstrikes had failed, the front lines had collapsed, and governments were losing control. But humans had never needed control to survive. They needed only desperation and ingenuity. The first ambush was in New York. A Zenari squad moved through the ruins of Manhattan, stepping over crushed cars and shattered concrete, scanning for survivors. What they didn't see was the small team of engineers hiding in the wreckage of a collapsed bridge, armed with nothing but a stolen alien rifle and a detonator linked to a buried gas line. They waited. When the Zenari squad stopped to analyze a human corpse, one they assumed was just another casualty, the trap was sprung. The explosion was not sophisticated, it was not elegant, but it was effective. The street caved in. Fire engulfed the towering aliens, and for the first time, Zenari blood stained Earth's soil. It was the first confirmed kill, and the moment the resistance truly began. The word spread like wildfire. Civilians, once terrified, now had hope. The Zenari could be killed, and if they could be killed, they could be beaten. Snipers started targeting the joints of their armor, learning that while the plating was impenetrable, the gaps were not. Every kill taught humanity something new. Guerrilla fighters moved through the ruins like ghosts, striking in small, unpredictable raids before vanishing. In the underground tunnels of Paris, an entire battalion of Zenari was led into an ambush so brutal that none survived. The Zenari responded by increasing their brutality, burning entire districts, executing civilians at random. But the more they pushed, the harder humanity fought. And then came the real turning point. In a hidden bunker in Nevada, a team of scientists had managed the impossible. They had reverse-engineered a Zenari plasma rifle. What had taken the aliens centuries to perfect, humanity had learned to replicate in days. It was crude. It was unstable. But it worked. The first human plasma shot was fired at a Zenari warlord in Chicago. It burned straight through his chest. The footage of his lifeless body went viral, broadcast through every underground network on the planet. The Zenari had come to dominate. Instead, they had started a war they didn't know how to win. The first few days of battle had been chaos, scattered resistance, failed offensives, entire cities reduced to rubble. The Zenari saw it as proof of their inevitable victory. They believed humanity was already broken. They were wrong. The moment humanity started adapting, the war changed. The first Zenari mistake was assuming they were hunting a weaker species. What they failed to realize was that humans were learning from every battle. Their armies had been shattered, their weapons outmatched, but the survivors weren't just fighting. They were studying. Every lost battle became a lesson. Every mistake was analyzed. Every failure turned into an opportunity. The Zenari learned this the hard way in Sao Paulo. A fleet of their drop ships had landed in the ruins of the city, deploying an entire legion of shock troops. Their orders were clear: eliminate all resistance. They expected human forces to flee or engage in another suicidal last stand. Instead, the Zenari began to die. At first, they didn't know how. Soldiers vanished without a sound, their armor left behind but their bodies missing. Squads were cut off, their communications jammed, their air support mysteriously redirected. And then the real horror began. The first hacked Zenari battle drone turned against its own troops. For the first time, the hunters had become the hunted. The secret was stolen Zenari technology. Captured plasma rifles had been crude at first, but human engineers worked fast. The weapons were modified, repurposed, and mass-produced. Now, human guerrilla fighters weren't just using alien weapons, they were improving them. Entire squads of resistance fighters moved like ghosts, wielding scavenged plasma rifles, using the Zenari's own battlefield AI against them. Their dropships were hijacked mid-flight, their supply convoys blown apart, with explosives made from repurposed alien energy cells. And in one of the most shocking moments of the war, a human pilot managed to steal a Zenari assault walker, a towering four-legged war machine, and use it to wipe out an entire enemy battalion. The footage of the hulking machine, now painted with human resistance symbols, went viral. The galaxy was watching. Other conquered worlds, long thought to be broken and obedient, began to stir. They saw what humanity was doing. They saw a species that was supposed to surrender refuse to die. The Zenari High Command began to panic. This was not how the war was supposed to go. They had expected total domination in days. It had now been weeks, and the humans were getting stronger, more coordinated, more dangerous. In response, they made a desperate decision. The bombardments would increase. The casualties would rise. The orders were clear. If humanity would not kneel, Earth itself would burn. But they still didn't understand the creatures they were fighting. Humans didn't fear destruction. They thrived in it. The Zenari were furious. What was supposed to be a swift and decisive conquest had turned into a nightmare. Their warriors, engineered for planetary domination, were being ambushed, outmaneuvered, and picked apart. Their own technology was being used against them. Their war machines, once unstoppable, were now being hijacked, sabotaged, or outright destroyed by a species that should have been crushed weeks ago. So they made the only logical decision left. If humanity would not submit, they would erase them. From orbit, the sky burned again. The bombardments increased tenfold. The warships above Earth turned their weapons on entire cities, reducing them to nothing but craters of molten glass. No longer did they target military installations or known resistance strongholds. They struck everything. Population centers, farmlands, even entire forests were incinerated in their campaign of extermination. Billions perished, but humanity did not break. In the ruins, survivors dug in deeper. For every city lost, new strongholds were formed beneath the earth, in mountains, deep underground bunkers, and hidden tunnels. The destruction did not scatter them, it forged them. The once separate militias and resistance cells, once struggling to communicate, united under a single command structure. What began as scattered attacks evolved into organized warfare. It was in the frozen wastelands of Siberia where humanity delivered their greatest blow yet. The Zenari had constructed a planetary command post, an enormous fortress that housed high-ranking commanders, communications hubs, and critical war assets. They believed it to be impenetrable, shielded by energy barriers, and guarded by thousands of elite soldiers. The Zenari saw it as their stronghold. Humanity saw it as a target. The attack began at night, under the cover of an artificial storm created by hacked weather satellites. The first wave was silent, specially trained infiltrators using cloaked Zenari suits to slip past security, planting charges at key structural weak points. Then the ground itself exploded. Tunnels, dug over weeks by human engineers, collapsed beneath the base, swallowing entire sections into the frozen abyss. Sabotaged power grids shut down energy shields, and within minutes, the command post was exposed. Then came the second wave. Human assault teams, armed with fully functional plasma weapons, surged in from all sides. Zenari defenses, expecting a traditional attack, were overwhelmed as soldiers, civilians, and even former prisoners fought like demons. The battle was over within hours. When the dust settled, humanity stood victorious. The Zenari High Command on Earth had been wiped out. Communications with the fleet above had been severed. What remained of the invasion force was now leaderless, scattered, and vulnerable. But even in victory, humanity knew this was far from over. High above the planet, the Zenari fleet prepared for their final move. If ground forces could not break Earth, then orbital annihilation was the only remaining option. The war was entering its deadliest phase, and humanity was ready. High above Earth, the Zenari fleet gathered for the final strike. They had underestimated humanity for too long. Their invasion forces had been crippled, their ground commanders wiped out, and their technology, their greatest advantage, was now in enemy hands. Every attempt to crush humanity had only made them stronger, more dangerous. The Zenari had no choice but to unleash their most devastating weapon, orbital annihilation. Their flagship, the harbinger of dominion, positioned itself in geostationary orbit, preparing to fire its planetary eraser, a weapon capable of turning the entire northern hemisphere into ash. Once activated, there would be no survivors. The resistance, the civilians, every last human would burn. But humanity had seen this coming, and they were already on the move. In the days before the final assault, stolen Zenari warships have been repurposed, modified, and prepared for one last desperate mission. Pilots, some trained, some volunteers with nothing to lose, were ready to take the fight beyond Earth's surface. For the first time in human history, they would take the war into space. The assault began the moment the Harbinger's weapon began to charge. Human-piloted strike ships, patched together from Zenari wreckage, tore through the blockade like vengeful wraiths. The Zenari, expecting only surface-based resistance, were caught off guard as their own ships turned against them. The battle in orbit was unlike anything seen before. Dogfights raged between human-piloted alien ships and the Zenari fleet. Salvaged plasma cannons fired indiscriminately, and the void became littered with burning wreckage as battleships exploded in bursts of blue and orange flame. A lone team of elite human commandos had a single mission: board the Harbinger and destroy the weapon before it could fire. Their stolen Zenari shuttle crashed directly into the hull, and before the enemy could react, they were already inside. Fighting through the corridors of the massive warship, the team pushed forward, plasma rifles scorching through enemy warriors. The Zenari fought ferociously, but the humans fought desperately. They weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to survive. As the battle reached the ship's core, the team's demolitions expert, once a civilian engineer, now a hardened warrior, set the charges on the weapon's energy reactor. The countdown began. But the Zenari flagship commander had one last trick. As the explosives neared detonation, he initiated a self-destruct sequence, ensuring that if the ship was lost, it would take everything with it: the resistance, the planet, and even his own fleet. There was no time. The human team barely made it out, launching themselves from the ship as the charges detonated. The Harbinger of Dominion erupted in a blinding fireball, taking the Zenari fleet's command structure with it. For the first time since the invasion began, Earth's skies were clear. But as the surviving Zenari forces scattered, one truth became clear. The war was not over. The enemy still had colonies, reinforcements, an empire beyond Earth. And now, humanity knew how to fight them. The Zenari had come to dominate. Now it was humanity's turn. The skies over Earth were finally clear. For the first time since the Zenari invasion began, their mighty fleet had been shattered. Their war machines lay in ruins, their soldiers hunted like prey, and their once invincible empire had suffered an unthinkable humiliation. But for humanity, survival was no longer enough. The war was no longer about defending Earth. It was about ending the Zenari threat forever. With captured ships and salvage technology, human engineers worked around the clock, reverse engineering Zenari weaponry and improving it with Earth's own ingenuity. Plasma rifles were now lighter, faster, and deadlier. Fighter craft, once cobbled together from alien wreckage, were now fully operational, built for speed, maneuverability, and destruction. And for the first time in history, humanity had its own fleet. The resistance had grown beyond Earth. The destruction of the Zenari command fleet had sent shockwaves across the stars. Other conquered worlds, long enslaved under the Zenari boot, began to stir. Whispers of rebellion turned into action. Resistance cells on occupied planets reached out to Earth, seeking guidance, seeking leadership. And humanity answered. The first counterattack came swiftly. A Zenari supply station orbiting Jupiter, once used to refuel their warships, became humanity's first interstellar conquest. A squadron of stolen Zenari bombers, piloted by human aces, obliterated the station's defenses in a matter of minutes. Before the enemy reinforcements could arrive, human strike teams stormed the station, cutting down the remaining defenders and seizing control. The Zenari barely had time to react before another attack hit them. this time on Mars. A hidden Zenari base, meant to serve as a fallback point for their forces, was targeted and destroyed in a single night. No human ships were detected approaching. No warning signals were sent. The base was there one moment, and gone the next, buried beneath an avalanche of explosives. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were winning. But the war was far from over. Deep within the remnants of the Zenari Empire, their High Council convened in secrecy. The loss of Earth was a catastrophe, but the war was not yet lost. The humans had proven far more dangerous than expected, and the Zenari were finally starting to understand why. Humans didn't just fight for survival. They fought for vengeance. A decision was made. If the humans refused to stay on their planet, if they dared to strike back, then they would be met with the full force of the Zenari Empire. No more half measures, no more assumptions. A second invasion was coming. But this time, humanity wouldn't be waiting for them. This time, they were bringing the war to the enemy's doorstep. Humanity's counteroffensive reached a fever pitch as Earth's newly forged fleet surged beyond the solar system. Every stolen Zenari ship and every hastily engineered plasma cannon carried with it the weight of countless sacrifices. Now, humanity was no longer fighting defensively. They were on the offensive, determined to break the enemy's backbone once and for all. At the helm of the human forces was Admiral Torres, a battle-hardened veteran whose scars were etched into both his face and the collective memory of the resistance. With steely determination, he orchestrated a daring plan. A full-scale assault on the Zenari High Council's forward command station, an impregnable fortress orbiting the gas giant, Varanus. This station was not merely a military hub, but the nerve center of the Zenari operations in the sector. Capturing or destroying it would cripple their command and control, possibly ending the war. The fleet moved as one, their formations honed through months of guerrilla tactics and hard-won lessons. Each vessel, a patchwork of alien technology and human innovation, shimmered under the cold light of distant stars. The assault began with a barrage of plasma torpedoes and precision strikes aimed at disabling the station's outer defenses. For hours, the void erupted in explosions and fire, a grim ballet of human defiance against a foe that had once seemed invincible. Inside the command station, the Zenari scrambled to regain control. Their calm, emotionless voices crackled over the intercom, issuing orders that were increasingly frantic. Every moment counted. The human fleet pressed their advantage, weaving through energy barriers and dodging concentrated fire with agility born of desperation. In a climactic skirmish near the station's central core, a squadron of human fighters, led by Captain Aisha Malik, a tactical genius whose reputation for audacious maneuvers was legendary, engaged in a ferocious dogfight with elite Zenari interceptors. The clash was intense, with plasma bolts slicing through the dark vacuum, leaving trails of burning debris. Captain Malik's wingman, flying an upgraded dropship bristling with human modifications, managed to breach the enemy's last line of defense, clearing a path for a daring boarding party. The boarding teams, clad in salvaged Zenari combat suits, launched from the human flagship and infiltrated the enemy station through a series of abandoned maintenance ducts. They moved like shadows along the corridors, neutralizing guards with silent precision and planting high-yield charges at critical junctions. Each step forward was a calculated risk. The stakes were nothing less than the future of humanity. As the charges were set and the countdown commenced, Admiral Torres' fleet unleashed a final, coordinated strike. The explosions rocked the station, rupturing its power core and sending shockwaves that rippled through the enemy ranks. The once impenetrable fortress shuddered and collapsed in a cascade of sparks and shattered metal. In that moment, as the Zenari command structure crumbled, humanity felt a surge of triumph and relief. The final gambit had paid off, and the enemy's grip on the sector was weakening. Yet, amid the celebration, a sobering truth remained. This victory was only the beginning. The war against the Zenari was far from over, and humanity's resolve would be tested until every last enemy was vanquished. The Zenari High Council was in ruins. Their command station, once thought to be an unbreakable fortress, was now nothing more than a drifting husk of wreckage in orbit over Varanus. Humanity had not only survived the invasion, but had delivered a devastating counterpunch. The war was no longer a struggle for survival. It was a campaign for revenge. But the Zenari were not defeated yet. In the aftermath of the battle, intercepted transmissions revealed a chilling truth. The remaining Zenari warlords had retreated to their homeworld, consolidating their forces for one final stand. They had underestimated humanity's tenacity, and now their survival depended on eliminating this threat before it could grow beyond control. For Admiral Taurus and Captain Malik, there was no debate. This war would not end until the Zenari knew fear the way humanity had. There would be no peace while their empire endured. The decision was made. Humanity was going to take the fight to the Zenari homeworld. It was a sight that no Zenari had ever imagined. A human fleet, forged from scavenged wreckage and stolen technology, emerging from the depths of space and approaching their homeworld. The Zenari had believed themselves untouchable, their planet hidden deep within the heart of their empire. Yet now, the species they had sought to exterminate had come knocking, not as prey, but as conquerors. The Zenari scrambled to respond. Their orbital defenses activated, massive planetary cannons locked onto the incoming fleet, and every warship still under their control was deployed in a last, desperate attempt to hold the line. But humanity had already adapted. With the stolen knowledge of Zenari fleet formations, human commanders outmaneuvered their defenses. Fighters weaved between capital ships, striking at key weak points with deadly efficiency. Plasma torpedoes rained down like fire from the heavens, detonating across the planet's surface, turning the cradle of their empire into a battlefield. And then, the ground forces landed. Thousands of human soldiers, once mere survivors, now elite warriors of a species reforged by war, stormed the Zenari cities. They used stolen Zenari armor, fired modified plasma rifles, and fought with the kind of ruthless ingenuity that no Zenari could match. Panic spread among the Zenari ranks. Their civilians, once assured of their empire's eternal dominance, fled in terror. Their warriors, bred for conquest, but never for desperation, fell one by one. For the first time in their history, they knew what it was to be invaded. As the last Zenari warlord fell, clutching the wound left by a human soldier's blade, he looked up at his conquerors. His species had come to dominate. They had seen humanity as nothing more than an inferior race, one to be enslaved or eradicated. But now, as he watched the human banners rise over the ruins of his homeworld, he understood the truth too late. They had never stood a chance. Humanity had been forged in adversity, tested by hardship, refined in the crucible of war. And when the universe came to break them, they became something unstoppable. The Zenari Empire was no more. Humanity had won. But as Admiral Torres stood among the ruins of their enemy's once mighty civilization, he knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there were others watching. Some would fear them. Others would seek war. But one thing was certain. The age of human dominance had begun.